I'm 71 years old, and no matter where I go, people keep asking me the same thing. Anthony, don't you want someone in your life? Aren't you lonely? Don't you miss having a partner? They ask it like it's a diagnosis, like being alone past a certain age means something has gone wrong. So eventually I stopped arguing. I decided to try. At 71, I told myself I'd keep an open mind. Maybe I'd been too rigid. Maybe I'd confused peace with resignation. Maybe everyone else saw something I didn't. Friends seemed relieved when I said it out loud. My children smiled in that careful way people do when they think they've nudged you in the right direction. They said I deserved happiness. They said life was meant to be shared. They said love doesn't expire. What no one told me, what no one ever says, is that you can feel far more alone inside a relationship than you ever do by yourself. To understand that, you need to know where I was before all this began. My wife Margaret passed away when I was 64. Heart attack. No warning. One moment she was standing in the kitchen, annoyed that the coffee had gone cold. The next moment she was gone. After 40 years together, the house didn't just feel empty, it felt unfamiliar, like someone had rearranged the world while I wasn't looking. The first year after she died was brutal. I won't dress that up. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was sharp. Nights stretched on forever. Mornings felt pointless, and weekends, especially Saturdays, were unbearable. Saturdays had been ours. Yard work, errands, lunch, somewhere quiet. After she was gone, Saturdays felt like time I had to survive rather than live through. But grief doesn't stay the same forever. It changes shape. Little by little, I adapted. Not because I wanted to, but because life kept moving and I had no choice but to move with it. I found reasons to leave the house. I lingered at the hardware store longer than necessary, just to exchange a few words with someone. I joined a woodworking group at the community center. I learned how to cook meals that didn't come from a box. I developed routines, not exciting ones, not romantic ones, but routines that fit me. It wasn't the life I'd imagined growing old into, but it was my life, and it worked. I wasn't lonely the way people assume loneliness looks. I had quiet, I had space, I had days that belonged to me. I could wake up and decide what kind of day I wanted without checking in with anyone. There was comfort in that. Then my family started worrying. It always starts that way. One evening at my daughter's house, between bites of overcooked chicken, she looked at me and said, "Dad, you shouldn't be alone like this." I told her I was fine. I meant it. She shook her head and said, "Being alone isn't the same as being lonely." That sentence followed me for months. Friends joined in, neighbors hinted, someone at church suggested a widow they knew. Even casual acquaintances felt entitled to comment, as if a man past 70 sitting alone was a problem that needed solving. And slowly, quietly, I started doubting myself. Maybe they were right. Maybe comfort had turned into hiding. Maybe choosing solitude was just fear wearing nicer clothes. At 71, you start wondering how many chances you really have left to get something right. So I tried online dating. It took me longer than I care to admit. Figuring out how to upload a photo nearly defeated me. Writing a description of myself felt ridiculous. How do you summarize a lifetime into a few polite sentences? Still, I did it. And when the messages began appearing, something unexpected happened. I felt noticed. Not loved. Not understood. Just noticed. And after years of being invisible in that particular way, it felt strangely powerful. That's how I met Elaine. She was 68, divorced, friendly smile, thoughtful messages. She asked questions that made me feel like she was actually listening. She laughed at my dry humor. She seemed genuinely curious about my hobbies, my routines, my past. We exchanged messages for weeks, then phone calls, long ones, comfortable ones. She talked about her grandchildren, her volunteer work, how hard it had been adjusting to life alone. I recognized myself in some of her stories. After a couple of months, we met in person. Lunch at a small cafe near her apartment. Nothing fancy. No pressure. She was easy to talk to, warm, engaged. When I drove home that afternoon, I remember thinking, Maybe this is what everyone was talking about. The early days were pleasant, predictable, safe. We saw each other once or twice a week. Dinner, afternoon walks, early movies because neither of us liked being out late. It felt reasonable, balanced, like a partnership that respected age and energy. For a while, I wondered if I'd been wrong all along. Maybe living alone had been easier, but maybe easier wasn't better. Then the small changes began. Nothing dramatic, nothing you could point to and say, this is the problem. She started calling every morning, just to say hello. Then again in the afternoon. Then at night. At first I told myself it was normal, that this was what closeness looked like. People check in, people care. But slowly, the calls stopped feeling optional. If I didn't answer right away, the phone would ring again. Then a message would follow. Everything okay? I was worried. Why didn't you pick up? One afternoon, I was at my woodworking group. My phone buzzed twice. I ignored it. An hour later when I called back, her voice was tight. She said she hadn't known where I was. I reminded her gently that Wednesdays were my group days. She said she knew, but it still felt strange when I didn't answer. That was the first time I felt it, that subtle tightening in my chest, that quiet sense of guilt for doing something that had never required permission before. Weekends changed too. She wanted plans. Every Saturday, outings, visits, errands together. And when I said I'd rather stay home, she looked disappointed. Not angry, hurt, like I was rejecting her, not choosing rest. I began agreeing when I didn't want to, saying yes because saying no felt cruel, because everyone had told me I should be grateful, because after 71 companionship is treated like a rare gift you're not allowed to mishandle. What no one talks about is how heavy that expectation becomes. You're supposed to feel lucky, energized, fulfilled. So when you feel tired or overwhelmed, or just want quiet, you start blaming yourself. You tell yourself you're being difficult, ungrateful, broken. About 6 months in, I noticed something that scared me. Every time her name appeared on my phone, my body reacted before my mind did. My shoulders tightened, my stomach sank. Not because I disliked her, but because I felt braced, like something was about to be required of me. One night, the phone rang late. I was already in bed, half asleep, television murmuring in the background. I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then I thought, what if she needs me? So I answered. Nothing was wrong. She just wanted to talk about her day, about a comment her sister made, about an appointment coming up. We talked for over an hour. When I finally hung up, it was well past midnight. I lay there in the dark, exhausted, not from staying up late, but from something deeper, something harder to explain. The next morning, my friend Daniel called and invited me fishing. I almost said yes without thinking. Then I hesitated. I knew if I went, she'd want to come, and if she came, it wouldn't be quiet. It wouldn't be still. It wouldn't be the thing I needed. So I said no. That night, sitting alone in my living room, I realized something that unsettled me. My life no longer felt like it belonged to me. And that was only the beginning. Once that thought settled in, my life no longer feels like mine. I couldn't unsee it. It showed up in quiet ways at first, in how I checked my phone before making plans, in how I measured my energy based on what she might want later, in how rest started to feel like something I had to justify. I hadn't lost my freedom all at once. I'd handed it over in small, reasonable pieces. At 71, you don't bounce back the way you used to. My days had a natural rhythm long before Elaine came into my life. I woke early, not because I had to, but because my body wanted to. Mornings were for reading, for coffee, for the simple pleasure of doing nothing quickly. By afternoon, I slowed down. By evening, I was done. Elaine didn't understand that rhythm. She liked late dinners, spontaneous plans, dropping by her daughter's house after we'd already been out for hours. If I said I was tired, she'd smile and tell me I needed to stay active. She'd mention people she knew who were older than me and still dancing, traveling, living. I started feeling like I was failing some invisible test. It wasn't that she was cruel. She wasn't. That almost made it worse. There was no villain, no obvious wrongdoing. Just two people needing very different things from the same space. Money became another quiet pressure. I'd been careful my whole life. Retirement didn't scare me because I'd planned for it. Social security, a pension, modest savings, nothing extravagant, but enough. I knew my limits. With Elaine, those limits blurred. Eating out became routine. Gifts became expected. Gas, trips, shared expenses that were never discussed, just assumed. A weekend getaway here, a birthday celebration there. None of it was outrageous on its own, but together it added up. I found myself lying awake at night doing math, running numbers in my head, watching the margin shrink. Not because she demanded anything, but because saying no felt like saying no to the relationship itself. At this stage of life, people treat compromise like proof of love, but there's a difference between compromise and erosion. I was compromising my rest, my finances, my habits, my peace, and each time I did, a small part of me disappeared. The hardest part wasn't what I was giving up, it was who I was becoming. I was quieter, more distracted, less present. Even when I was alone, I felt on call, like my time was provisional, borrowed, always subject to interruption. One night, sitting across from her, she casually said, "I think it would be easier if we lived together." She didn't say it dramatically. No build-up, no tension, just a statement, like it was the next logical step. My body reacted before my mind did. My chest tightened. My hands went cold. Panic rose so fast it surprised me. That night, after she left, I sat in my living room, the same room where I'd spent decades building a life with my wife. Every corner held memory. Every habit was earned. I imagined someone else's schedule shaping my days, deciding when the lights went off, when the television stayed on, when silence was allowed. I realized something terrifying. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of disappearing. Breaking up with her wasn't dramatic either. It was painful, but simple. I told her I couldn't continue, that I wasn't built for what she wanted, that I thought I was ready to share my life again, but I wasn't. She cried. She asked what she'd done wrong. I didn't have a satisfying answer, because in truth she hadn't done anything wrong. And that's what made the guilt so heavy. My family didn't understand. Friends were disappointed. Some implied I'd made a mistake. Others suggested I'd let fear win. At 71, people assume endings are failures. For weeks, I felt awful. Second-guessed myself constantly. Wondered if I'd thrown away my last chance at companionship. Then something unexpected happened. One morning, I woke up and didn't reach for my phone. I didn't wonder who needed me. I didn't calculate the day around someone else's expectations. My first thought was simple. What do I want to do today? That question hadn't belonged to me in a long time. Slowly I returned to myself. I went fishing again, sat quietly with my line in the water. No conversation, no commentary, just stillness. I went back to my group, reclaimed my routines. My evenings grew quiet again, not empty, but calm. And I noticed something that surprised me. I wasn't lonely. I felt settled, grounded, whole. That's when I understood the mistake I'd made and why I paid for it. I'd believed the lie that being alone is something to fix. At this age, solitude isn't absence. It's space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to remain yourself. Companionship isn't supposed to cost you your identity. And when it does, the price is higher than most people realize. There's one more thing I learned. Something I wish I'd understood before I tried again at 71. And that's what I'll tell you next. The last lesson didn't arrive all at once. It settled in slowly, the way truth usually does, quietly, without announcement. After Elaine and I ended things, people assumed I would rush to fill the space she left behind. They expected grief, regret, or at least restlessness. Some even hinted that I should get back out there before I changed my mind, as if being alone was a temporary condition, not a deliberate choice. But what I felt wasn't emptiness. It was relief. For the first time in months, My days unfolded without tension. I woke up when my body was ready. I ate when I was hungry. I rested without explaining myself to anyone. Silence returned to my home, not the sharp silence of grief, but the soft kind that lets you hear your own thoughts. That's when I finally understood the difference people had been talking about for years, without truly grasping it. Loneliness is the absence of connection. Solitude is the presence of yourself. When I was married, I wasn't alone. And when my wife died, I learned how to be. That learning didn't disappear just because someone new entered my life. But I ignored it. I let other people's fears override my own experience. At this stage of life, time changes meaning. You stop measuring it in years and start measuring it in energy, in clarity, in peace. Every obligation costs more than it used to. Every compromise takes a deeper toll. Love, if it's real, should add weight in the right places, not press down on your chest. I realized I wasn't afraid of commitment. I'd committed once, fully, deeply, for decades. What I feared was losing autonomy, the quiet, hard-won understanding of who I am when no one else is steering. There's a particular danger in relationships after 60 that no one warns you about. People assume maturity makes everything easier. That experience smooths the edges. But the opposite can be true. By this age, you've already shaped a life that fits your body, your habits, your limits. When someone enters that life, they aren't joining a blank page. They're stepping into a structure. And not every structure is meant to be remodeled. Some people thrive in shared space. Others thrive in parallel lives. Neither is wrong. What is wrong is forcing yourself into a version of happiness that doesn't match who you've become. I paid the price for ignoring that. Not in money, though that mattered. Not in time, though that mattered too. I paid in tension, in anxiety, in the slow erosion of joy, in that feeling of bracing every time the phone rang. That's not love. That's obligation dressed up as devotion. When people ask me now why I don't try again, I don't argue. I don't explain. I simply say I'm content. That word unsettles them more than loneliness ever did. Contentment doesn't sell well. It doesn't fit the story people want to tell about aging. But it's honest. I still have people in my life, friends I fish with, neighbors I talk to, family I care about. I'm not isolated. I'm selective. And that selectivity is a form of wisdom. If there's one thing I'd say to anyone considering marriage or serious commitment after 60, it's this. Ask yourself what you're giving up, not what you're gaining. If the answer includes peace, autonomy, or the right to be quiet without guilt, pause. Listen to that hesitation. It's not fear, it's information. At 71, I ignored it. I told myself I was being brave, open, flexible. In truth, I was betraying the life I'd already built. I don't regret loving my wife. I don't regret trying again. But I do regret not trusting myself sooner, because there's a freedom that comes with age that you don't get back once it's surrendered. These days, my mornings are simple. Coffee, light through the window, a plan, or sometimes no plan at all. My time belongs to me again. And that, I've learned, is not loneliness, it's peace. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.